Hello and welcome to the 495. I'm your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. Lou, how are you doing this
Welcome
week?
back.
Thank you. Yeah, I was on vacation. I was up in the White Mountains last week.
That's
and
right.
Trying to decompress as much as I could, trying to do as little as possible. I brought a big stack of books with me and maybe read 2 pages of one of them.
That's
the
good,
rest
though.
of the time,
Yeah.
just drank a lot of coffee and hung out with my kids and my wife and, cooked and I did get to go swimming in the mountains in 30-degree weather, which I wanted to. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, you're into this ice bath
Yeah,
thing
I'm into
now,
the
right?
ice bath thing. So I went up and I think it was called the Twin Mountains and found a little state park and went swimming for a little bit. And that was great. Although I was nervous they were going to arrest me or kick me out or something. I don't think I was supposed to be there. And then when I left, a park ranger did come up to me and asked what I was up to, but he was more concerned that I was camping illegally. He didn't really, I don't think it didn't cross his mind that this nutcase was going to be out like swimming with, like everybody else was in coats and hats.
Were you dripping wet at that point? Or?
I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I don't think I was dripping wet. I did towel off and you dry pretty quickly. It was a walk to the pond.
Yeah.
So, I maybe looked a little odd, but I think he was more concerned that I was camping. It was great. And then this Saturday, I came back and I walked 20 miles.
Really?
I walked from Chelmsford to West Concord. And I did that because it ties into this show.
Oh, really?
I did that because starting this Friday, State Senator Diana DeZoglio, is starting this charity walk across the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, across the whole thing. She's going to walk the entire state starting Friday. And I'm going to be out there with her the first day. So I wanted to at least try 20
going
miles
east to west
see
or
how
west
I feel.
to east?
She's starting out west.
Okay.
So I will get up bright and early Friday morning and go out and meet her there. And we're going to write a little story about it. And she's going to be the guest on the podcast next week, and she's going to tell us about her experiences.
Excellent.
She may be zooming in from the trail.
Oh, that'd be great.
This will be at first. I think she's still going to be out there next Wednesday. So we'll see. It's going to be it'll definitely be interesting.
So it should be in like Fitchburg or
I don't know. I haven't seen the plans. I think
Groton.
they might be a little. There might be some kind of security issues with the plans. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not like you can just go, pick up the newspaper and see where she's going to be at any given time. I don't know if that's because of security or just because they're sorting it out. But she is going to be going with some different officials and community organizers and all sorts of people along the way. So it'll be a story worth following. I'll be live streaming Friday on the Merrimack Valley Magazine Facebook page too, so people should check that out if you get a chance. So it'll be a really neat story. So, anyways, I walked 20 miles just to see what it was like.
And how did that make you feel?
I felt fine. I've been walking a lot this year. I would say that it was actually. I'm someone who never gets bored. I feel as though I never get bored. I started to get bored.
A little challenging.
Which I didn't expect. Now, I was doing it by myself. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point where it just seemed like I can't possibly still be in Chelmsford, I was like walking for so long. And I didn't see like the Westford sign. It was like, I just can't be going on this long. It feels forever. Yeah. And then I would get into Westford and there were certain landmarks I was looking for. And it just seemed to, like my whole concept of time was thrown off by this.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I got a blister on my foot. Physically, it was fine, but there was a kind of like, man, it felt never ending. It felt never ending. But it's like one of those things where the whole time I'm doing it, I'm like, I'm never doing this again.
It's a 10-minute drive.
Why am I doing this?
It's a 10-minute drive.
Well, yeah, I could have gone to back to the White Mountains and returned in the time that it took me to do it. It took 6.5 hours with some breaks for tea.
Yeah.
So it took a while. But
that's a lot of walking.
The whole time.
And
I'm just thinking, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm never doing it again. And then what's the first thought as soon as you're back in the car? What am I doing next weekend?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I want to go for another long walk, right?
That's a long walk, and it's not the distance, it's the time. I'd be more intimidated by the 6 hours than the 20 miles.
It was a lot. And I kind of, and maybe our guest can sort of speak to this, because I was sort of doing this kind of mindfulness practice. I wanted to clear everything out, reduce my outside stimulus as I was doing this. So I decided I wasn't going to listen to any music the whole time. And then maybe like the last 90 minutes, I was like, forget about that. I'm putting on the music. Like, I can't stand this anymore.
That's admirable, but even yogis can't go that long.
Yeah. So I cranked up the Rolling Stones, and it made it a little bit more bearable on the trip. So our guest today is, if I'm pronouncing your name right, Aine Greaney, who's a New Report-based writer. Aine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And my pronunciation of the name is pretty good?
That's correct.
It's
Yes.
correct. Excellent.
Excellent.
So I want to dive in first off with this seminar that's coming up on October 21st, and then we'll get into you and who you are and all sorts of other things related to writing. So what's going on October 21st?
Well, it's a 4-part series, Doug. It's for the North of Boston Cancer Resource. I volunteered with them twice before to offer a seminar, and I'm one of the speakers as part of the speaker series. And it's to mark October's Breast Cancer Month. And the North of Boston Cancer Resource is for anybody whose life has been impacted by cancer, including caregivers, or anybody whose life has been at all impacted by a cancer diagnosis. And this, I know that they're collaborating with Anna Jake's Hospital here in Newburyport. And it's just a free offering, by the North of Boston Cancer Resource to, virtually, because people can't attend events now. And I was really delighted to be asked back to do this short seminar on how writing can help you to, reach various wellness goals. And that it may be one of the wellness practices that you can mix in, as you deal with your cancer, or you're in recovery from cancer, or you're taking care of somebody with cancer.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this because it struck me as I write and edit, for a living sometimes. And it struck me as I was thinking about it. Writing is strange in this regard. It's strange in that there are so many things we do to handle, say, the stress of COVID that involve getting out of your head, getting out of your mind, right? So it doesn't matter whether that's whiskey or it's running. Part of what you're trying to do is shut off. But I have to imagine it's the opposite with writing. You almost go deeper into your experiences and start to articulate them. So it becomes strange because you're so used to so many of these ways of handling stress that have to do with escape.
Right. Well, I think there are two things. Like, first of all, the tactile experience of writing is in itself a stress release. And then there are various ways that you can use what they call expressive or emotional writing. Like, you can use it to vent, or you can use it to kind of analyze your current situation. Many of us feel very overwhelmed right now and very unsure about what tomorrow will bring, what next week will bring, what will it be like 3 months from now. And writing is a way to kind of, whoa, let's calm down I call it the Rice Krispie brain, snap, crackle, pop brain. It's a way to sort of, stall the clock, think, write. And yes, you are going in deeper, but sometimes I come up with some solutions then. For example, one of the things I've been trying to do in our COVID isolation is to, every Monday I make myself list 5 things that are stressing me out right now. And I try to limit it to 5. And then I go back through and I make myself circle 3 things over which I have some control. Now, it may not be a big control, but, just a small thing, like stay off social media, go to bed when you're really tired. Don't stay up past your sort of exhaustion threshold. Small little things like that, make a call to so-and-so. And I make myself come up with 3 kind of small controls. And I feel, I think one of the things that stresses me out, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know talking to some of my friends is the same, is this lack of control, because we don't know where this virus is going. We don't know if our kids are going to be back in school full-time, part-time, partially. We don't know so many things. We don't know when we'll see our family again, in my case. And I think when you regain a touch of control over this, out of control scenario, I know that it reduces stress for me. It really does.
So for people listening right now who might be like, oh, wait a minute, I need to do this. It's been a while since I've written. Do you have like an exercise that you could share so that when people are done watching this podcast, they can open up a notebook or open up their laptop and do something that will take them 15 minutes that might be useful?
That's a great question, Doug. That one that I talk about, list it. The other one that works for people, and I've gotten really nice feedback on this one, is to take out like a slim little notebook. Can I do show and tell
Yeah,
here?
please.
I'm an ex-teacher, so bear with me.
Some people are
You know,
just listening, so I might explain what you're doing.
a baby notebook.
Baby notebook.
And just write 8 things along the side, a list, and then just write the first 8 things that come into your mind. Not 10 and not 5, 8. That for some reason I cannot explain, that seems to really work. And once in a while you'll get into item number 5 and really take off and keep writing. The other one that I love, and that some of my students have loved, but I personally love, is I'm a great walker as well. I don't know that I could have done what you did, Doug, but I'm a great and daily walker. And I force myself since COVID, again, we do what we can in times of stress. No matter how busy my brain is when I'm walking, I force myself to come back from that walk with one moment of pure awe and pleasure. This morning it was like one of the last roses, still down along the river here in Newburyport. And, I just made myself sort of look at the bee who was landed on that rose, and the rose, you can tell the rose is on its last legs, really. And just to come home and jot down your moment of joy or awe, because the rest of the day those moments may be tough to capture, but just one awesome thing from your day or from your morning. I found that just jolts you out of the pity party and just sort of switches your brain over into a moment of kind of gratitude or pleasure, and it's quick to do. I mean, all the research around this type of writing says 15 minutes a day actually is plenty, 15 minutes a day, 4 times a week is plenty. It can be longer, but 15, the effects start to show after 15 minutes, 4 times a week.
Yeah. It's interesting. So it's like walking in some ways. Or, people talk about like forest bathing or something like that. Like you get remarkable Prozac-like effects in a very short time.
Oh yeah, I mean that's been my experience through most of my life, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that when I talk with people or do a seminar or whatever, the mistake people make is they think they have to write a big long what I did on my summer vacation kind of narrative. And you really don't. Those lists, those little bullet pointed lists, the baby tiny notebook that's only as big as your cell phone. They're fine. People think that you have to have this big glamorous setup, this literary looking setup.
Right.
You really don't. I don't. And I'm a writer. And then there are several online, one of the bizarre advantages of the pandemic has been that there's a lot online now for free. And people are trying to create a kind of a virtual community around wellness and around just surviving this mentally and emotionally. And there are many online resources which work just as well. If you hate handwriting, and many of us may hate it, I don't, but I know people who've gone to parochial schools where handwriting became kind of the bane of their lives, then, don't do it. Do a stylus and an iPad, or do a keyboard.
Yeah. Although I had to ask you, about this. You are recommending a notebook. I mean, do you do that deliberately to take a break from the digital world?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly now when we're all, on Zoom and our face-to-face interactions are reduced, thankfully, because it's a safety measure. But I personally want a break from digital.
Yeah.
But as you can see, I didn't come of age within digital, but I mean, I met one person I know who uses writing consistently for an antidote to depression, and he's like, "No, I'm not handwriting. You can forget it.
Yeah.
I'm a stylus and iPad guy."
Interesting.
And he's like, and it works a charm. Every single morning, have my coffee, do my writing.
Yeah.
My partner says I'm a different person now.
It's fun. Early on I don't even think the pandemic had, well, it hadn't started yet because she was in the studio, but Susan Kapuscinski-Gaylord was in here.
Oh yeah, I
She's
know
an
Susan.
artist
Yeah,
and a
yeah.
calligrapher. And
Right.
I read her wonderful book that came out, I think earlier this year, or late last year, on calligraphy and her history. So autobiography through the lens of calligraphy, and it shamed me a little bit because I've always had terrible handwriting. I didn't go to parochial school. So my writing is just wild. It's like certain things I do in cursive, certain things I do this way, certain things I do that with the letters slant this way and this way and that way. It's my writing looks terrible. Uh, but after reading it, I felt kind of ashamed, and I bought some nice pens, and I started practicing, and I asked her for recommendations on books, and I actually went through books and started doing the
Yeah.
exercise. And my handwriting is a little bit better now. It's still, I don't necessarily like people looking at it. It's a little bit more clear. But it's funny because that's stuck with me, that habit of doing that. And I really like writing on paper now. Like as much as
Mm-hmm.
I can, I'm going to grab paper and I'm going to write whenever I can.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I don't have the burden of some childhood where I was kind of forced to do it in a way that made it unpleasant. But anything to get away from digital, because digital it can be overstimulating because it's not just that thing. Right, here's the
Right.
problem with the stylus, right? Is that iPad has a whole bunch of other things in the margins kind of like
Exactly.
waiting for you. And it's very easy to flip over and go check Facebook or do something else. Whereas when you just have this and a cup of coffee, there's just a little bit less distraction. The pace seems to slow down a little bit. It seems a little bit more.
And it's very personal as well. All of
Hmm.
our handwriting is very unique. You can almost always tell somebody's writing. So it feels like that personal, quiet time just for you. Whereas, like you say, Doug, digital is kind of, whoa, there's something else I better check. Oh, look, there's an email from so-and-so. I better
Right.
see what they need.
Sure.
But that said, I really think that digital has a benefit, especially, if you sign up for one of these places that there are a couple of places that will send you a writing prompt every morning or every day. And, for somebody getting started, that may be perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. We all approach things differently.
Sure. So I want to ask, we haven't really introduced you yet. So I want to get into who you are and what you do. But before that, I want to make sure I ask about your website and your blog and some of the resources. So if people want to find out more about you and get some of these resources, where do they go? What's your website?
My website's same as my name, which is my maiden name, actually, AineGreaney.com. So it's AineGreaney.com. And strangely enough, I had no problem finding that URL.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, there's an accent on the capital letter
Yeah.
A. In our magazine, we use a strict AP style where we never use accents, and it becomes a problem because if some, Nibbana Cafe opens in Lowell and they put an accent on the E, every single time we have to sort of like think about it. Are we going to, like, that's what they call it? Do we put the accent there? Do we take it off? So in AP style, we lose the accent, but then it becomes a different letter, right?
Yeah, like the accent gives it the broad A sound. So the accent's called a fada, and it's kind of like a French aigu. So that's why it's Anya. Whereas if you took off that accent, it would be Anya.
Yeah.
So it's the broad A versus the, and it's Irish for N.
Yeah.
And many countries have Anyas. Germany, Poland, Holland, Russia, but there are different spellings, obviously.
Does it bother you to see it without the accent?
No, because
Okay.
often I type it without the accent as
Okay.
well,
All
because
right, good.
I'm in a rush and I don't have the time to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's funny because when I get a call with some really strangled version of it, it's pretty sure it's a telemarketer. So it has its advantages.
Sure. So who are you? Where did you start? Where did the writing start in your life?
Oh,
How did you come to this?
Well, I grew up in County Mayo, rural County Mayo, which would be most of County Mayo, in Ireland, on a small farm. My family still has a farm. And, it was a very isolated kind of, compared to nowadays, it was a very isolated kind of existence. We didn't know that, but it was. And I became a reader very early in life. I loved to read, like really early in life. And
Yeah. Did you have favorite writers when you were young? Do you remember any in
well,
particular?
every British and Irish adult who reads grew up on Enid Blyton. She was a children's writer. And that was like, I mean, Enid Blyton was our life, really. And she had a couple of series. She had a children's adventure series, and then she had a boarding school series. And I would read them twice. When I ran out, I'd read it another time. We lived about 3.5 miles from town, but we had a farm, but my father worked as well, like a day job, so to speak. So we didn't get to town that often because nobody was home to drive us. But when I did get into town to the library, to the little library, which kept getting booted out of whatever building they were into, a new building, but I would just stock up. I mean, being in the library to me was like bringing another kid to a playground. And then, I remember scribbling little things as a kid, and always wanting to sort of write a story as well as read all these stories, to which I was, when I say I was addicted to reading these stories, I remember actually sitting in the bathroom reading because that was a good place to not be disturbed. But, and then around 14, I remember, I went to school in that town. I went to a secondary school, a convent secondary school, like most girls of my age. And I remember school being hard. Like I remember it being difficult and feeling, I'm an introvert by nature, and schools are built around groupthink, if you think about it. And I remember really struggling with that. And I kind of knew that the favorite girls were the kind of smiley, happy, dappy girls. And the girls, sporty girls, the jock girls were the that was a good girl. And I was a nerdy, studious, introverted kid. And I remember really struggling with that. And I remember sitting with my homework one night. I was probably about 14, maybe. And literally just pushing it aside and pulling out a notebook, and never stopped since that. And I just remember every night then, before I was supposed to be upstairs in my bedroom doing my homework, like most kids. And the Irish education system is extraordinarily rigorous. It's just all these government exams. You pass an exam halfway through and an exam at the end before going away to do whatever you're going to do with your life. And I really should have been studying, to be honest, because they're tough exams. But I would pull out that little notebook, and I have no idea where it is now. I shudder to think where it is now. And who looked crooked at you on the school bus? That was important to write about, Doug. What boy did you see on the street walking down to the bus? All that kind of deep stuff. But I also remember processing the day in the notebook, and I remember being conscious of the fact that something was going on here, that I wasn't the greatest fit in the world for that environment, that school environment, that group think and that all do the same thing together think.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you mention that, because from my perspective, because I was into literature when I was young, and I always, I'm going to, skirt cultural essentialism or something here, because there was a time where it was like you saw the Irish people as making this out of proportion contribution to Western culture through literature and through language. All right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you're going to talk about like the Irish character, language and a facility with language and storytelling was at the heart of that. But you also felt like an outsider within that.
Yeah, I did, like you, I that was my favorite class, obviously, and I had a good English teacher too. I loved English and I loved French. I would have stayed in school and just done those two. Mathematics. To this day, I think the people in the bank, like, I can see them looking at each other like, come on, I had to deal with her last time. I mean, come on, it's your turn. She can't even balance a checkbook. I was reading at that stage, I was reading way past what I should have been reading as a 14-year-old, to be honest. I was reading your Edna O'Brien, your John McGahern, your very adult novels.
John McGahern, he was great. He's not read. Amazing. He's not read too often in this country. I saw him read.
Yeah, I did too.
He was fantastic. Great short story writer and novelist. If you don't know John McGahern.
I saw him too at the State University of New York, and he said one of the wisest things I've ever heard a writer say. There was a journalist in the audience. I'm going off track now, but I told you the Rice Krispie brain.
Yeah, it's good.
And I remember, there was a local journalist in the audience who asked him, as an Irish writer, how do you feel about blah, 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 whatever. And I remember McGahern stopped him and he said, no, there's no such thing. A writer is a writer is a writer. And you may be writing about a given geography, but, you know, a writer is a writer is a writer. And the geography isn't necessarily the main kind of tag, so to speak. And I've never forgotten that, you know. I've never forgotten his lovely approach and his very peaceful kind of approach, you know, even though we were all in a big auditorium.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I remember knowing that certain poems we studied in English class gave me comfort, and the words would run through my head during hard, you know, tough times. And then others felt very, you know, they didn't have any effect on me at all. And to this day, I use some of those poems. I call them my blankie poems, you know. I have a collection of little poems that just bring me comfort or tell me how to live, you know, tell me, you know, your Mary Oliver poems, your Emily Dickinson, your Thomas Hardy poems. They are my kind of, okay, you know, kind of what would Thomas Hardy do? You know, I call them my sort of emotional protection poems. And there's a whole body of literature around that we can use literature as a pick-me-up.
Sure. What are you reading now?
I am a late convert to Kindle. So at the moment, I'm reading a mystery set in Australia, you know, for light, very light reading, even though it's actually pretty gory. So I'm reading that. And then also I've been looking at this book, which is, again, show and tell. It's about expressive writing. It's called Words That Heal. So yeah, I'm near the end of my mystery set in Australia.
Yeah. So speaking of setting, and you mentioned this in the context of John McGarren too, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the Merrimack Valley and how that figures. Because it's like, I think it's easy for a lot of people to understand, you know, where you can get poetic with London of the 19th century or New York of the 1970s, or like certain things. It's just like, you know, there's material there. Where do you find material in the setting of the Merrimack Valley for writing?
Out my attic window, for starters. We'll start with that. And I've even written an essay about this and published it in a British online journal. You know, I would sit up there. It's an unfinished attic. Well, it's a finished attic, but it's not, you know, one of those beautiful attics. So it's got the slanted roof and my journal and a pen. And in the winter, when the leaves go off the trees, I have a full-on vision, or I have a full-on view of the Mermaid. And I've written pages about the Mermaid. And I remember actually at one of the seminars for the North of Boston Cancer Resource, I was showing them my 8 things journal, you know, that list of 8 things we talked about. And they were like, well, give us an example of what's in there. And I started flipping pages, and I'm like, oh, the Mermaid. Oh, I guess it was foggy 3 days ago. Oh, I guess it was really a beautiful blue on Tuesday morning. So it's, you know, it's out. And then I walk by the river every single day of my life. But I think also, and I've given this an awful lot of thought over the years, there's something about living at the junction of 2 waterways, you know, the Atlantic and the river. And that's Newburyport. I mean, we're really kind of sitting at, there's something about that, and I can't put my finger on what it is. But when I'm, you know, walking by the river here, which we call downriver, right? I always get mixed up between downriver and upriver. But anyway, on the edge of the river, I'm kind of conscious all the time of the actual riverbed itself and how it, you know, the actual shape of it as it comes down from New Hampshire, you know, of what it follows, the shape that it follows. But there's definitely, I often think about that when I'm out for my walk. I just think about, there's something gorgeous. You want to talk about your moment of awe and gratitude. There's something lucky and gorgeous. And you know, I'm not a wealthy person, but there are days I pinch myself because the idea of living at the junction of 2 waterways, you know, and then in the case of the Mermaid Valley, we're also living where, you know, America's Industrial Revolution was, you know, was almost born, and with some great and very inspiring labor strikes here in the valley, you know. And I think we often kind of downplay those, and we don't kind of think to ourselves, wow, like first of all, the canals in Lowell were dug by a group, or led by a group of Irishmen who walked all the way up from the Boston area. They walked up to Lowell to hand dig those canals back in the day. Actually, that predates the main Irish migration, after the Irish famine. And then that, based on those canals, you had this huge industrial revolution that other countries looked to, including, they say, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is reputed to have traveled here and written back to England about this pristine example of industrialization. Now, maybe he should have asked the mill girls working inside that industrialization, So that's a long answer to a short question, Doug. But yeah, it really influences my work and influences my day and how happy I feel, but there's something about that, just being between two major waterways in a country that isn't mine, in a country that's letting me live here.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask you about, and I think it ties into what you're talking about. I wanted to ask you about Thanksgiving, because we're getting into that season. You've written about Thanksgiving.
Yes, I have.
And how much you like it. And
Yeah.
and Thanksgiving is a politically kind of charged holiday at this point. And it's also something that is, I think is seen through the lens of like an immigrant experience. It might appear different, than it would for me growing up in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. So what is it you like about Thanksgiving?
Well, first of all, I'm not a very commercial person, and so compared to the other holidays where there are gifts involved and crowded malls and stuffed up highways and all that kind of thing, I love that it has no agenda at all. It does have a historical, echo, not always a favorable one, or not a favorable one, I should say. But in our present day, I love that it has no religious affiliation and it has no gift buying or any kind of expenditure outside of the meal. And the meal can be, there is the traditional meal, but the meal can be according to your preferences, or, whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian or whatever. And it just feels like a nice downplayed holiday to me. And then also, now this year, I don't know how that holiday will pan out because people can't travel. But it seems to be all about sort of the extended family and or the neighbor who has no place to go, or the cousin who may not have an invitation from anybody else. It almost seems like this reaching across, that saying, and it won't come to my mind now, the one about if somebody needs something, you build a bigger table and invite them to the table. That's the feeling that I love about it. Whereas Christmas in this country seems to be more about the sort of nuclear family. And in Ireland, we have Christmas and then we have St. Stephen's Day, or they call it Boxing Day in England, the 26th of December, which is a big holiday as well. And that's the day for extended family. But the day itself, the 25th, always was kind of the nuclear family. But I love the idea of a November holiday when we all need a little lift that's about stopping all commercialism and just gathering to eat a meal of some make, shape, or variety, and possibly having donated to an organization that makes that meal possible for those who can't afford it. I love that sense.
Did you worry about writing, covering this topic, given how there's a lot of political division right now and things have gotten kind of extreme? Were you concerned about tackling this in a public way?
Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Has Thanksgiving become politicized?
I think so.
Really?
Well, I mean, if you weren't concerned, you weren't concerned. It's just, yeah. I sometimes hear from writers. I ran into a writer the other day in the woods who started talking about how it's tough for him to kind of navigate because he just feels like you don't want to offend people over here. You don't want to, you don't want to, you know what I'm saying? And of course, when I listen to you, everything you're saying is moderate and makes sense. I don't think it's going to cause outrage with anyone. At the same time, I think, writers have to face the idea that their words may be taken out of context right now. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Are you going to be defending, a colonial history that where there's blood on the table.
Yeah, that does. Yeah, that is there, and I'd have to give that more thought. And it is, it is a part of our colonial history. But at the same time, there has to be one day during the 365 days when we just have a meal.
Yeah.
So then move the date and call it something else. Get together day or whatever. But there has to be one day when the stores are closed. We're not buying or selling anything. We're hopefully not on our internet. And we're just sharing a meal of some sort. And then hopefully, I would advocate for the other part as well, that you're helping those who can't afford that meal. And I think, most of the local organizations here, and certainly the organizations in Boston, do a great job at that. That, there are many, many places where somebody can go for a hot meal on that day and to be with people rather than sitting home alone.
So I have two questions.
We could move the date.
Yeah, okay. We'll consider it if it becomes a necessity. So I have two questions for you before I open it up, because Lou always has questions when I'm done. The first is, beyond the seminars, beyond teaching, beyond your work full time, right?
Not right now. No, I actually, my job was eliminated in March.
Okay, sorry to hear that.
Oh,
so
I'm one of many.
Yeah, sure. So, but the question is, what are you working on now in terms of your own writing?
Oh, I'm pottering around with a couple of essays. I always have a few essays on the go. Some of those start in my writing journal in the morning, and then, a couple of weeks later, I'll go back and read something and decide, wow, that's worth pursuing, or, playing around with on the page, so to speak. I'm also working on probably America's longest novel in progress. And toughest.
No, I'll challenge that.
This thing has a life of its own. Really.
Yeah.
And it's a novel mainly set, in the UK, in outside of London, in a town outside of London, and it opens in Ireland but moves to the UK. And at this point, I don't know where that book is. It's half handwritten, half typed. I've tried using Google files to kind of shape it up a bit, and I don't know.
How long have you been working on it?
Well, seeing as you ask, a good 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
you're
it has
just beginning.
changed.
You're just in the
remember,
preliminary stages then.
I remember waking up one morning and saying, all right, if you, what do you really want to write? And if, God forbid, if something were to happen to you tomorrow, what would you need to write? So I got up and started writing this book, but I since changed the setting 3 times.
Yeah.
This book has globe hopped quite a bit.
You've written other novels. Did these novels take a long time as well?
Oh, the other one took 7 years, so I guess I'm ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Right? Dance Lessons which came out in 2011, that took 7 years. But I was writing, short stories and essays in between. And then I'm also kind of pottering with, another collection of short stories. But again, I'm not one of those writers who keeps perfect, pristine files. To say the least. But mainly the 2 projects right now are, some essays in progress and then that novel.
Okay. And then the other question I wanted to ask you, aside from the novels you've written, you've written essays, you've written articles, people can go to your website and find them. What else have you written in terms of books?
Oh, my first book was a kind of a light-hearted novel called The Big House, and that came out in the UK quite a while ago now. I think it was 2003. And that was fast. I wrote it fast, got it published fast. It gave me a false sense of security in the publishing system. I've written for the Mermaid Valley magazine, as you know, Doug.
It's still your memoir piece still comes up in our meetings as we need something like that. It's still mentioned all the time.
Oh no,
it comes in a good way.
then I have a small little collection of short stories which came out of a small press in California. And then I have a book, a how-to instructional book called Writer with a Day Job. Because at the time I did work full-time and was desperate to hold on to I was working out in Andover. And I was desperate to hold on to my writing life while working full-time. And then, I remember thinking, no, stop with the pity party. You can do this. You know how to do this. Just get up earlier. So I pitched that book, Writer with a Day Job, and lo and behold, Writer's Digest Books, which, they liked it and they contracted with me to write it. And I still get notes from readers of that book who have, childcare and elder care and jobs to hold down, and still tell me that book has really helped them sort of hold it together. And then, like I say, that book Dance Lessons came out 2011, and then in 2019 I have a very small collection of essays called Green Card.
Yeah, we reviewed it in the magazine, so if people want to go to our website, you can find a review. And
a beautiful review that touched my heart. So that, that's it. You always think you should be writing or publishing more, but then life sometimes gets in the way too.
Sure. As far as getting copies, other than going to your favorite independent bookstore in the area, if you're near Jabberwocky or someplace like that, I'm sure people can get these titles at Jabberwocky, I hope, or order them there.
Yes.
Where's the best place for people to get copies if they want to read your works?
I think the first novel's out of print by now, to be honest. And so is the collection of short stories. I think that's out of print as well, because it was a small university press in California, which were a delight to work with. But mainly, if you get on my website, you can order the book of essays directly from my publisher, and that link is on my website, or Jabberwocky, or Amazon. And then also the essays are available now as for Kindle also. So usually Amazon will have any of them.
Great. Lou, do you have questions for our guest?
Yeah, first I was fascinated by the discussion of writing as a form of mental health care in terms of self-care and things like that, because it was that for me. I mean, I've been writing professionally for 30 years now, and my first impression of that was that I don't get to write that way anymore. I write about subjects I get paid to write about. It's not necessarily processing my inner feelings. But then it occurred to me, how does social media play a role in this? In other words, I can go to my Facebook page and jot out, a couple sentences of gratitude or a couple sentences of anger in a public forum, and that gives me a little bit of relief and helps me with the stress around it. People use Instagram that way. They take a nice picture and they put a little caption under it of gratitude or something and help. Does that help, or is that an example of the wrong way to do it? Does it have to be private, or can it be public like a social media setting?
Well, it can be both, Lou, really, because the isolation journals, here's one of the pandemic kind of free resources that was put together by a woman who felt people needed some writing release. And I'll take this as an example. The pandemic journals will send you a writing prompt you can read on their website. And then if you want to join a sort of a virtual writing community, I'm sorry, it's called the Isolation Journal. It's not called the Pandemic Journal. It's called the Isolation Journals. My mistake. They will tell you on their website how to join the community on Facebook and to join the Isolation Journals private group on Facebook. So, it can be a great way of building writing community. And I'm in a couple of Facebook writers groups, for people who write essays and people who write memoir and people who write creative nonfiction. So you're getting the community there in a way that we can't now. You can't go see your writers group, unless you're very socially distanced and wearing masks. But I think what you're also asking, and tell me if I'm wrong, is, the actual piece you write up there on whatever platform. You have to use it in a way that works for you. Obviously it goes without saying, never post anything that you think will come back and haunt you.
Right.
Because we know employers now will look us up on social media.
And I'm guessing the difference is when you're on social media, I edit. I will not go as far as I want to go, or I will have what I think publicly would look like a sappy
Right.
or self-indulgent viewpoint that I won't put up on social media, so I don't write it. So I'm guessing the privacy of writing in your own journal allows you to, throw off those limitations and just dig in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. When you write in your own journal, it's for nobody else.
Right.
Unless you choose that it becomes for somebody else. Like I say with the isolation journals, you can choose to share your work. Or there are a couple of sites like that where you can choose to enter this virtual community and share it, but you can also choose to not share it and to simply have it as where you vent or write or plan your day or whatever in the morning with nobody looking at it. And you make a really good point in that you will write quite differently for both platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same writer who's sitting there with the journal all by yourself
Right.
versus putting it up there publicly. There is a bit of a switcheroo when you're writing for the public, I think. And one isn't better than the other, by the way. It's kind of just two different parts of ourselves, the public part and the private part. And one isn't better than the other. We have to have some public persona. We can't spend forever in our houses.
Unfortunately, as a pro, I find myself a lot of times saying, if nobody's reading it, why am I writing it? It's like I have that struggle. It's like, so doing the personal journal is struggle for me because what the hell am I writing? I write so people can read what I'm writing.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you never know who's reading it either. And then is it quantity or quality?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
You never know when you get a little note from somebody saying, I read such and such thing. It really helped me think about something differently. And that one person is everything. That one person is worth 20 casual readers on whom your writing had no impact at all.
Right.
Like, give me the one person who, that it changed the way they thought or it comforted them or made them feel better than 20 people who just kind of casually clicked through, so.
My son is 21, and he had his first novel published at 18, and I say first novel published, I mean not the first one he's written, but the first one that he published at 18, and I struggle, even as a writer, trying to come up with advice for him because his journey has been so unique so far and so different from what I did. I mean, he just writes and puts it out there, and it took me a long time to get to that point. What kind of advice would you have for him at this point? Because how do you write with 18 years of experience or 21 years of experience on this earth?
Well, he must be a fairly introspective young man.
He is, yes.
Yeah. So, my English teacher in secondary school, I remember her asking us once, she said there's the story about the two dogs. One dog sits in his kennel and watches the world. And then the other dog, puts on his walking shoes and trots all around the world. Mm-hmm. And I remember her asking us, a bunch of scruffy looking little 13-year-olds in our little school uniforms. She said, which dog do you think is, has seen more and is the wiser dog? And of course, wave our hands up. Oh, I know, in our little navy blue uniforms,
Yeah.
And I remember her saying, not necessarily. The dog sitting in the kennel could be seeing just as much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about the person, I think, than the dog who trots all around the world and has all these worldly, temporal experiences. That said, at his age, to be honest, I would be careful about sort of. There's the commercial aspect, which we've all been in, all three of us, of writing, and you're writing for a paycheck or you're writing for the public to read it. And there's the non-commercial, and the commercial sometimes needs a dad or needs some adult wisdom to kind of make sure he's navigating those commercial waters.
Yeah, I hesitate to get in too sternly because he's good, and he's got a good perspective and I read it.
Oh, good.
And the first novel, I didn't get to read it till it was actually published. I read it on a flight out to California, actually, and I read it with my hands over my eyes because I wanted it to be good. Please be good, because he was very secretive about his writing in the past. And I was like, damn, it's not bad. I don't even have any advice for him, except there was one loop around I would have liked to have had him done. Let me ask you finally, and it's kind of a personal question between me and you, because I live in Newburyport. I live on Plum Island, and I've lived on.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I've lived on the island. I've lived on the river all my life, and I've been walking the streets of Newburyport for 10 years before I was a resident of Newburyport. It never gets old. Those streets never get old. That river never gets old, and people look at you like you're strange because it's just a piece of water. but man, it gives you something every day. It's really fascinating that you said that, because I've always felt that all my life. I could walk this river every day of my life and never get bored by it.
Never. Like this morning I was out and it's this gorgeous blue, after yesterday's rain. And like I say, the last of the roses. And now the marshes are turning kind of that coppery color, for the fall.
Yeah, and just the sunrises and the sunsets, and it's just like it always gives you something different every day, it seems.
Every single day. And now that they've opened up the last part of the trail here, the part that they had shut off because of PCBs, that used to be my favorite little piece of the river, and now it's back open.
Yeah, because it feels it's kind of isolated. It feels like you've kind of left the city for a second, for a few feet.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that seems like a great way to end the show. A little bit of inspiration, for people to get out there and experience that, and maybe get a little writing done. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been
podcast.
Great.
Really happy we were able to make this happen, and it's very, very cool. I hope people go to your website. Will you give them the website name one more time, please?
It's AineGreaney.com. So it's AineGreaney.com.
And it's very likely that someone, probably Steve Pennepe from the magazine, has put that in the comment section by now, too, to make it easy. So if you're watching on Facebook, you might be able to go down in the comment section and click there.
Well, this was really, really enjoyable and a very rich conversation.
Yes.
We did some major globe trotting.
We did. Yeah, thank you very much. And so that's it for this week. Next week, as I said, Senator DeZoglio is going to be on, and we're going to talk about her adventures crossing the state of Massachusetts. So I will see everyone next week. Anya, thank you very much. Lou,
Thanks
thank
so
you very
much. Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Lou.